Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Motherload. We are here for another conversation with a mom who has a very interesting story into motherhood and how she has journeyed through that. And I'm going to let her share her details with you. And so, welcome, Chantel.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Chantel, if you don't mind, we'll just start with a little bit of the pragmatic information about yourself, and then we'll go into more of the details.
Okay, sounds good. So, I am a teacher here in Regina. I am a young mom of two. I am 34 with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I first met Kayla when I was on mat leave with my first, and we got to partake in an art class with Kayla, and I loved it. So, I had your very typical first mat leave, loved everything about it, and then you have this dream child, and then life tells you to have a second, and that changes on you. But, I had the typical exhausting pregnancy second time around. Obviously, I had a 1-year-old, I was back at work, et cetera, et cetera. And I was about to give birth on that summer of 2018, and I had a couple symptoms that were kind of wonky that I'd been kind of doctoring over for about a year. But given that I was pregnant, I had breastfed my first for a little over a year, et cetera, et cetera. They were kind of just putting them on the side and just telling me I was a young mother. So I was prepping for the new arrival of our little girl because we had a boy initially. So doing all the fun things, shopping for a girl. And to my surprise, I was diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer at 35 and a half weeks pregnant. So it kind of changed our whole world in about 1 second. And here I went from, us just like going to welcome our second into welcoming our second and getting ready to kind of fight for my life. So it was a whole new ball game in the world of motherhood. And so I can chit chat about that a little bit. And I was lucky enough to be able to follow one of Kayla's classes in the spring of my mat leave during treatment. And that was also extremely healing and wonderful to do. So I can chit chat about that as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that introduction, Chantel, and
You're
sharing those
welcome.
details, those parts of yourself that can be very vulnerable and scary to share. So, can you speak to some of the ways that you've been kind of thrust into, a mother of two, going through something very significant on your energy levels, your physical body, your emotional self. Can you just speak to some of those changes that occurred in that time frame between like 35 weeks pregnant, to maybe towards the end of your treatment, or what that time frame really looked like for you?
Sure. So obviously at 35 and a half weeks pregnant, they deemed that I would be healthy enough and the baby was healthy enough to be induced. And so it took, the induction process was a little bit long. It was kind of like a 4-day process, but that's okay. So I delivered Beatrice on August 5th. I was diagnosed August 1st. And we did everything in the world to have a natural delivery. And so that was a change with Ben. He was breech the whole time. We knew that I would be C-section. So when I went into labor, I went into the C-section right away. So with Beatrice, I was really looking forward to laboring naturally and having that connection. Well, I shouldn't say that. I had a connection with Ben, but, really feeling the birthing and all of that, because obviously with C-section, it's a little bit different. Things move fast, you're medicated, etc. So But unfortunately, in the induction process, Beatrice flipped on us. So she was a footling breech. So they were like, you know what, Chantel, you're healthy. Healthy.
Yes.
You can do this. So I was going to deliver this footling breech naturally, because it meant that if I had her naturally, I didn't have to postpone treatment. So I really, when I look back, everything was such a whirlwind. You don't have time to make decisions, or even, like you have this birth plan. Well, that was thrown out the window in 2 seconds flat when she flipped on us, et cetera, et cetera. So I was trying not to like beat myself up on like that we possibly weren't going to have this natural delivery. And then when they said I could deliver this footling breech, I was like gung-ho. I was ready to like put all of my hypnobirthing everything to work. But she ended up putting her foot through my cervix, which put us into emergency C-section. So that changed things greatly as well, because it meant that we could possibly postpone treatment for 6 weeks instead of 2. So I was really trying to be present in the moment of like the birth of my baby, but in the back of my mind was, I got to start treatment right away, because ultimately I just want to survive in this first year of my baby's life. And you don't realize, I think, the impact until after, when you look back and you realize like, oh my gosh, I have all these memories with my son, and I don't seem to have these like vivid memories with my daughter. I look back at pictures and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I took those pictures, but where was I? How come I don't remember this the way I do with my son? And while I was at home and very present in my daughter's life, I mean, I was obviously going to doctor's appointments and stuff like that. I definitely realized I mentally missed out on a lot because of probably the aftermaths of treatment. So I realized in the spring of my mat leave or sick leave or whatever you want to call it, that I needed to start doing something for myself, because I think I was getting so lost in trying to beat this cancer, I guess you could say, that I was losing myself and losing myself as a mother. All I was doing was trying to fight this cancer, appointments, this and that. And finally it was just like, whoa, like I never questioned that I wouldn't survive, but it was the way I was going about it. And so that's when your class came about. It ended up getting postponed a couple months, which was fine, because I wouldn't have been able to go because I ended up with surgery. They called me in for surgery right in the midst of that. So I realized when I came back into your class how I thrive with your classes and your social media follow-ups, because I realized the importance of art in my life, and how I mother, and how I'm a wife, and even how I teach. So going to those classes, I was lucky to have some family staying with us, so I didn't have to bring Beatrice, which for me was a little bit easier just because of my surgery aftermath and stuff like that. But I was able to sit in that class, find myself as a mother and wife again, and then come home and put that into practice a little bit. Like one huge thing is like the music for me. It was like I forgot how big of a role music played in my life. And so I came back home, and then, like with the kids, we'd start our mornings with the music. And because that was my routine with the kids, I was just, even though I, was still bald as heck and probably not feeling well, or, not looking like your typical mom, I was still enjoying and being in the moment with my kids. And so, like one thing led to the other. And so I started throwing in, kind of like prayer and meditation again. And it was like I had just, like I said, I was just putting everything into fighting this cancer instead of really being with my kids. And not intentionally. I don't think any mom means to do that, but it was just really good to just kind of get back into that groove of finding myself first, to be able to find myself as a mom through this whole ordeal.
Yeah.
And so that just, it kind of just went up from there in that moment. And now I just, like I said, we have so many routines that thrive from what I took back from your class again. And yeah, so it's great. So once I was able to just come over that kind of like that hump, I definitely was able to manage a lot better.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
And so how has art or creativity, crafts, there's like insert whatever word you'd like to use
All
there,
of the
right?
above. Yeah.
All of the above. How has that helped you just lighten the load of motherhood?
Well, first of all, I feel like my children react isn't the right word, but they respond very well to these little moments that I throw in art. And I didn't realize how little of an effort it took to like throw a CD in or whatever. Or like my mom brought up our old tape, like our cassettes of like a common or of a popular artist that we used to listen to when we were little. So, we throw that music on in the morning and we kind of start our day. Next thing you know, we've already had breakfast, we've gotten dressed, and instead of me like fighting with the kids, it's like just struggling to get them dressed, to get them to eat. They know that this is our routine. We pick a song or we pick a cassette, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, we're dressed, and I haven't had to raise my voice once. I mean, let's be real, it's not an everyday, like there are moments where it's like, just get the fuck out the door, I don't care.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah. So
Yes, those moments, they still happen. I was saying to a client just the other day about how she was surprised about something that showed up in her art, and she was like, "Wow, I have not thought about this for a long time." And we reflected on it, and we took it all the way to the end in terms of like what she needed from it, and what the message was signifying for her. And towards the end of the session, once the activation had kind of come down, I had said to her, the art never lies. Like you can't lie your way through art, especially intentional expressive art. I think when you're like creating something in like an art class or paint night or at school, definitely I think you can shove that down because there's a process or there's direction or that kind of thing. But like true open-ended expression, songwriting, poetry writing, the expressive art that I do, you're always going to find a piece of yourself in that. And the messages that come through are not coming from another person. They're coming from you. And so in this moment, I said, I couldn't have picked that out from your art. You picked that out. And so there's a reason why you've picked that out, and the reason why you're sharing this story with me, that even though it's super activating and really an intense kind of memory that's happening for you, you picked that out. I didn't make you go there, right? And so it was this beautiful intersection of like, her thoughts had slowed enough that she was able to go back to this really intense memory, and then we were able to move through it. And that memory has informed a lot of our work since. And so even though the music and the art and the poetry helps, it absolutely helps, but it never takes it away. We are the ones who actively reduce that stress or complete this cycle through that. And I think what you've mentioned there is really, really powerful in terms of like, not only were you kind of losing yourself in motherhood, you were losing yourself in this diagnosis, and that's absolutely natural and absolutely valid. I mean, when you consider the timing of everything, and you're looking forward to so many milestones, not only in your life but in your children's lives, um, and just like really going into that, like that fight mode, right? Like
Yeah.
I just need to fight it. I just need to survive it. And like you said, you never questioned the like your human survival, but still, like, you still had to get
Yeah.
to the other side. You had to fight
Yes.
to get to the other side. And
Yeah.
whatever ways, however somebody gets to the other side, I think is really, really beautiful. You've mentioned music, which I think is, which is really, really amazing. But I think it's also, sometimes we think of its simplicity, like it's, oh, it's just music. How can it, have this like profound effect on my life? It's just music. Music is around everywhere. But it's not in that same intentional way.
Right. And even music brought me back to my childhood. We always fell asleep to these French lullabies. And it was, I realized, like, no wonder I feel so impacted by some of this, because I think that too, like, I had forgotten that that was
Mm.
what we had done when we were little, and that my children may enjoy something like that and really be brought to a place of calm with music as well. It just kind of did a full circle for myself, and actually brought on a lot of healing from my childhood too,
Mm.
because I realized that that was such a good place in such a good moment in our childhood, that it was just like, as opposed to looking back and being like, oh, my parents were divorced, oh this, oh that, my mom was a single mom, we really struggled. It was like, no, like, it was the beauty of remembering how I felt every night when we knew we got to go play those lullabies or music and just fall into a deep sleep. So it
Oh.
music is huge for me. Yeah. It I also realized the importance of continuing to practice these art incorporations throughout my life. So I was able to actually do like a writing course through the cancer clinic, and it was called When Words Heal. And we had to do some art pieces like poetry writing, and we could draw if we wanted. And so, same thing, like they would give us kind of like a sentence or a meditation or something, and then we just had to, like, on the whim, write or create art or whatever. And I have never considered myself a writer. I've never been one to like love poetry per se, not the deep stuff anyway. And all of a sudden it was like the words that I was writing brings me right back to your session with your other mother. Like, I could not have planned or picked out what was going to come out or come onto that paper at that moment. And that was like a huge healing journey as well in the diagnosis part of it. I didn't
Mm.
realize I was still so hurt about some stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and part of that being disappointed in myself as a mom,
Mm.
because we have these visions of how we should be as a mother, and it doesn't have to be a cancer diagnosis. It can just be anything. Any mental health, any ideas that we envisioned that we're not following through with, like it even like I realized that, like, a daily podcast, or even just putting humor, like following Kat and Nat, because they put motherhood into a humorous perspective that, like, no one tells you that shit. Kids,
Yeah.
like, it ain't all fun and games,
No.
like,
No.
oh, anyway, so
Yeah.
it's, yeah. It's
Yeah.
been a huge healing journey for me in all forms of art that I never even knew was important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing, amazing. It sounds to me, Chantal, like you've really gotten a good handle on what we call in the helping professions like reframing your story. And so,
Okay.
you
Yep.
know, like I heard you say it could have been about the divorce and the fact that my mom was single and you know all of these things, but the memory that I'm choosing to hold on to, or the reframe. Is that you know we had this really beautiful moment at bedtime,
Yeah.
and not that the divorce and having a single parent doesn't have an impact on you today, because it absolutely does,
Sure.
but choosing, and it's not a, we can't always get to the point of choice, I think, in some of our you know mental gymnastics,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but for you it really sounds like you've got a really good handle on not necessarily seeing just like this idea of like toxic positivity, you know, like you're not reframing everything to just be
Yes.
positive, but you're equally like feeling the things and feeling the weight of it, but also knowing the tools that will allow it to feel lighter or reframed, or at least allowing you to not sit and ruminate in that.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's where though, like I always talk about you to like other women, not even just mothers though, like, um, because like I said, had I not, gone into your class with my first, just because I was part of the Mommy Connections, so I hadn't followed one of your classes, but Mommy Connections brought me in. I would have never known that all of this was waiting for me. So I think it's part of like jumping out of your comfort zone too. Like, again, I was a super artistic person. I mean, um, in those ways, like at home and stuff like that, journaling, and I knitted and I did this and did that. But um, I I believe that sometimes you just have to step out of that comfort zone to just try something new, because maybe talking to someone one on one like a psychologist isn't something for you, but maybe expressing yourself and, like you said, finding out things through art that you could have never planned or even decided that that's how it was going to come out comes out, and it's so freeing for anything you're going through. Like, I know that my girlfriend and I, for when we followed your what was your class called even? I forget. The
Flourish.
Flourish, yes.
Yeah.
We were like, man, I feel like I'm getting way more out of my husband wife relationship than I'm getting out of like the motherhood part, because you were just like, when we would debrief with the other moms and it just seemed like that's where our conversations were going. And it was like, I was just so grateful because I felt normal in my relationship, because it was like, okay, I'm not the only one going through it. Okay, this is totally a man thing. Like, not that we should
Yeah.
blame everything that way, but you know what I mean? Like, it was just so healing in so many
Yeah.
ways. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea that, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, you go through this too. Or, oh, like even though our life circumstances are very different, or socioeconomical, or race,
Yes.
or even sexuality, like all of those things is like, oh, you experience this with your partner too. Oh, okay. Not like, just even that like intrinsic validation that like you're not the only person who has to deal with like even the most mundane, like the dishwasher is loaded wrong, you know, like wrong. um just like, okay, this is like, that's like my one goal, and anything that I offer, if even one person out of however long the offer is, however it's laid out, is like, if they can say to themselves, oh, I'm not alone, then that's like, that's my main goal in anything and everything that I do. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your sharing of your story and
Oh,
sharing all of those pieces with us. And thank you for bringing attention to how music has helped you, and not only other pieces of creativity, but the music specifically. I think um, it's something that is looked at um, almost too simply, you know. I
Yes.
think sometimes, like how could a song make a difference, or how could 20 minutes of music listening make a difference? But it absolutely does. And so through this conversation, Chantel, this month, for those of you who are watching the Motherload, this month you're going to get at least one music related exercise, because this has been a really great reminder, even for me, to incorporate more music into the healing process, and just the management and the toleration, you know, of those difficult moments, like morning routine, bedtime routine, supper. um, I find that my 5-year-old will sit, you know, at the dinner table longer if we just have some music playing, um, just so that, you know, supper doesn't feel like such a, oh, well, we have the rule that we all have to sit at the table till we're all done.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it helps him stay there, and not be, and actually we can actually have a conversation about our day. I mean, he's developmentally at that level,
Yeah.
but yeah, it definitely has made a difference. So thank you so much for being
Oh, well,
here with
thank you
us
for having
today.
me.
Oh,
Always
yes,
a pleasure.
not a problem at all. So um, keep an eye out on your inbox for future exercises. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Motherload. And please, as always, leave your comments below.